Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, August 17th, 2017. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani, back inside our New York City studio. It is back doing the show. I am back doing the show, I should say. I appreciate Luke Thomas for holding down the fort last week. As you can see, the big man is not here this week, but we are still going for deep. As per usual, much to discuss as we are rapidly approaching the highly anticipated Mayweather-McGregor fight. So let us get into all of that. You know that man. That is the man in the shirt, Jeff Wagenheim of the Washington Post. That is the Colombian kid, Danny Segura of MMAfighting.com. And that, of course, is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall of MMAfighting.com and The Ringer. All right, guys. So what are we, 9 days out now? Today's the 17th. Yes, 9 days out. And every day there's another little layer to the story, another little chapter written. Yesterday, it came out of the Nevada Athletic Commission, who voted unanimously to drop the size of the gloves that both Mayweather and McGregor will be wearing come fight night from 10 ounces to 8 ounces. I know this might be foreign territory for some of our viewers who focus solely on MMA, but typically fights that are contested above 148 pounds, the combatants wear 10-ounce gloves. Below that, it's 8-ounce gloves. Floyd Mayweather, throughout his career, has typically fought at 147. He is used to wearing the 8-ounce gloves. This never came up in negotiations, but around 3 or so weeks ago, Mayweather put something out in social media saying, let's do it in 8-ounce gloves. Conor said, sure. It gets to the commission. They vote on it. Were you surprised that they voted unanimously in favor of the 8-ounce gloves?
The Nevada Athletic Commission surprised? I mean, come on. The proposal probably came in on green paper because those guys, to those guys, as we've seen so many times before, when talking about MMA, the Nevada Commission is all about how much money is coming toward us. It's all about the money. And so how are they going to help the promotion? Well, by helping the promotion draw more people, by filling the arena, and this morning I went on Ticketmaster, there are tons of tickets available for this fight. How are they going to sell those tickets out? By making it seem like it's a better fight. And how are they going to do that? By having smaller gloves, at least the perception of having smaller gloves. That gives, McGregor, who has the quintessential puncher's chance of winning the fight, gives him a bigger chance. And so the Nevada Commission plays right along as all of us would expect. I mean, even those of us who mostly focus on mixed martial arts have seen, Floyd Mayweather gets pretty much what he wants with the commission because he brings the state of Nevada a ton of money. So this is just the latest of that.
The ringside physicians put out a statement the day before yesterday saying that they really want the commission, when discussing this, to look at the scientific evidence, to pretty much stick to the rules. There's a reason why in 2006 they put these rules in place. Don't make any exceptions, essentially, is what they were saying. Nevada never even brought that up. They never even talked about it. They never really addressed it. I mean, there was some talk, with a doctor, but I mean, it was kind of all done very willy-nilly. Is this essentially, when you're thinking about a fight where a 49-0 guy is being, allowed to fight a guy who's 0-0 in boxing, should this even, should this come? I'm surprised that anyone is shocked about this. Should this come as a surprise to anyone?
I think this fight's so big, and like Jeff said, that we knew the commission was gonna pretty much do whatever they were gonna, McGregor and Mayweather wanted. What I am surprised though is that Mayweather wanted to fight in 8-ounce gloves. I know he's has tons of experience fighting in 8-ounce gloves as opposed to 10. But I mean, we can all agree that although it gives advantages to both guys, probably it favors more to McGregor. So that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, the fact that Mayweather did go ahead and wanted to compete in 8-ounce gloves with McGregor.
Yeah, this is one of those weird situations. I almost feel like Floyd Mayweather could go before the board at this point and say, I want a referee that's on a unicycle and I want him to be a clown, and they would at least consider it before they would say, like, no, we can't do that, that sort of thing. But at the same time, like, when you think about, like, Floyd Mayweather, and I think I saw that 46 of his previous 49 fights have been in those size gloves. He has obviously a glove fetish of sorts. He wants them to be exactly how he feels comfortable. I'm not surprised at all that he wants to go there. And the other thing is, he has taken some heat. I can't imagine a competitor of his status doesn't want to actually make some kind of statement here and maybe score a knockout, because literally he's not had very many knockouts in the last 10 years. The Victor Ortiz thing actually comes with an asterisk. You have to go pretty far back to find, where he was knocking guys out, which just isn't his game. So I feel like he probably sees an opportunity to maybe get that done in this fight. He feels comfortable in those gloves. And Conor McGregor, I really don't believe it matters to him. But at the same time, if you're saying like, hey, let's get a little closer to what you're comfortable in, I'm sure he's going to be happy with it. Ultimately, the weirdest part of this, though, is like what you mentioned, a 49-0 guy going against an 0-0 guy and saying like, instead of erring to the side of safety, they go the other way. That just doesn't happen unless it's these two guys, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, it's also it's all about the promotion. So much of the stuff, I'm sure we'll talk about other elements of this over the next hour, and all of it comes back to somebody has the perception that this fight is not selling enough, or that they're not doing the amazing numbers that they've predicted. I mean, we've already heard them talk about surpassing the Pacquiao fight. Maybe they will, or maybe they won't. We've talked about this being a hot ticket in Vegas. Well, at least according to the Ticketmaster, it doesn't seem like it's as hot as they thought it was.
Although Leonard Ellerbe said last week that they're already at 60 million as far as the gate is concerned. So
Leonard
are
Ellerbe
you
said
calling
that.
him a liar?
Leonard, I'm just saying he's a promoter.
The record is 72 million, by the way.
He says that. Dana White says that Conor was destroying Malignaggi for 12 rounds in the gym, but then give us 15 seconds of footage that's from 2 different rounds.
Right.
So, is he a liar? Well, he's a promoter. Then we get Mayweather, who says, I'm going to go with a smaller glove, which clearly does give McGregor a little bit more of a boost. So it tells me 2 things. One, that Mayweather is so confident that McGregor's not going to touch him, that he'll give him whatever size glove he wants. Yeah. And secondly, that, hey, we want to sell more tickets. We got to sell more tickets. So let's do something to make that happen.
One theory that I was thinking about was Conor's team said that they think that this was just something that Mayweather threw out just to create some buzz, but didn't actually expect it to come to pass. And I was wondering if the Nevada Athletic Commission is now in the position of trying to cozy up to Conor, because Conor is the guy who's 29. Conor is the guy who's going to fight for another 10 years. Floyd has said repeatedly this is his last fight. So did they look at this and say, okay, how do we please Conor? And is it possible that Floyd really did this as a publicity stunt and didn't expect them to actually vote yes?
I mean, who was the last guy to almost freeze them out a little bit? It was Conor McGregor. And I feel like that actually, because you remember in the aftermath, obviously they went back and changed everything. I believe that, I think that they're like, hey, wait a second. We just almost pushed our looming cash cow, the guy who could be around for a long time, out of Nevada. Let's not do that again. So I do feel like that's part of it. But I absolutely do think that Mayweather was just trying to drum up some publicity like that, and probably didn't expect that to get done because it hadn't been done. Like you said, above 148 pounds, they just don't do that. So I think he was just more like throwing it out there just to create buzz and conversation. And then all of a sudden, here we are. I will say, for me, it adds just a smidge more of something to it, because you feel like, from Conor McGregor's standpoint, coming over and doing this, the boxing gloves just look different on him. You know what I mean? But if you can get them just a tiny bit smaller, so you're 2 ounces, it's like there's something about that, especially knowing his power and also knowing his chin. And I don't know if he's already in the head basically saying what he believes Floyd is going to do, because we know what he does is he points out to his opponent what he thinks they're going to do to keep playing the game before the game. I just think he wants to get Floyd to engage with him. That's what he's basically doing. And I don't think that either one of them expected this to happen, but here we are. And it's just one of those twists, man, that just keeps in a fight that has so many.
I agree with Jeff, though. I agree that this was a brilliant sort of marketing ploy, because like yesterday, I was picking up my son from day camp, and someone came up to me, a counselor, and was like, so are they going to fight in 10-ounce or 8-ounce gloves? I don't even know if people understand what the difference is, but it's just another layer to help sell the fight, like Paulie, these sort of fabricated storylines that we did not expect going into it have kept this fight in the news throughout, right? I mean, it doesn't stop.
And it's also not only the fact that, they're bringing down the glove size, right? And then everybody's like, okay, Conor, might have a little bit of knockout power, but also the fact that McGregor and his team were pretty confident in saying, well, if this does happen, this is going to end up in a first or second round knockout instead of fourth.
Well, that's his whole thing, right? His biggest thing is like, I'm going to go knock him out. It only helps his cause.
Sure.
Right.
What were we going to say that?
I was just going to say that it brings it down to the most simple terms. I mean, think about this. In order to make this the big event that everybody expects it to be, you have to draw in not just boxing fans, not even just MMA fans, but this grand public who many of whom may not even watch either of these sports very much. But everybody can understand that if you got 10 ounces of something here and you have 8 ounces of something here, that there's a difference. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of boxing that are jargon-filled and people just don't understand. But anybody can understand that there's a difference between a 10-ounce thing and an 8-ounce thing. And so they just seized upon the most simplistic concept really within the fight and said, let's mess with that.
So long as there's no horsehair stuffed inside.
Well, exactly. That would be another one. Like people talk about horsehair. Nobody knows what that
Mexican-made gloves.
Nobody knows what Mexican-made gloves and horsehair. What does that mean? Nobody really understands what
Connor
the significant.
didn't even know about that.
Nobody knows. I don't understand that. I've been watching boxing all my life, but I know the difference between 8 and 10. Right?
And I saw Luke Thomas had posted something about one of Floyd's previous stipulations about the horsehair and things like that. It's I don't know. It's just one of those weird things that we're examining gloves this closely, but especially on a fight of this magnitude.
And just to put things into perspective, like 2 ounces might not sound like a lot, but 2 ounces is half of an MMA glove. So you know, it is a significant, you know.
Sure. King Mohammed Lawal, who is an MMA and boxing aficionado, was saying to me on Twitter that he thinks that this is a massive difference. That you know. He was basically saying, and I actually think it goes back to your point, which I thought was the best point of them all, like he hopes someone doesn't get seriously injured here. Now, Conor McGregor is a guy who gets hit very hard with 4-ounce gloves. We've seen that he has a pretty damn good chin. But it is amazing to me, and I would love on Fight Week if the commission met with the press, Bob Bennett, Anthony Marnell, the chairman, because look, you do have to answer some questions about why this fight is happening, and it can't just be about money. I mean, not that long ago, we saw someone in the state of New York, which completely changed the way this commission here regulates combat sports, get serious brain damage. And, you know, here you have a guy who's 49-0, who boxes at an incredibly high rate, fighting a guy who's 0-0. Now, I'm not suggesting that I think that Conor is in danger. Quite frankly, I think it's crazy to rule him out of the fight, but they should have to answer some questions as to how they came to this conclusion in terms of sanctioning the fight, why they're making it 8-ounce gloves. Like you said, if anything, they should be erring on the side of safety, being conservative, not going more into the loosey-goosey territory.
Now, I have, as much as anybody, I've leaned on the 49-0 versus the 0-0, and I stick to that. But I do think we have to allow for the fact that Conor McGregor is an elite combat sports athlete. And so it's a little different than just Joe off the street stepping in 0-0.
But they offered no evidence as to why this makes sense, as to why they just kind of sat around and pontificated.
But we know exactly why it makes sense, because they can make a ton of money for Vegas. Think about how much money is going to come into the coffers of the state of Nevada.
Do you believe that if they would have said, nah, we're going to stick with 10, that this fight suffers financially, that it now makes less money than it is going to make because they moved it down to 8 ounces? Like, really?
Yeah, I guess I would say that it will, because it's one more thing that just kind of generates a little more buzz. I mean, I can't back that up with any numbers, but all of a sudden, you know, people were talking about the fight. We were hearing about lagging ticket sales, and who knows how the pay-per-view will go. I mean, I imagine it's still going to do really well no matter what. But if you added one more element, some people might just say, I wasn't interested, but now I might see, this could be a knockout. Look, what is the biggest complaint about Floyd Mayweather as a fighter? He's a guy that doesn't engage. He's a guy that can defend you off and make you miss, and then if he does get hit, he's out of there. Well, McGregor's not going to have a lot of chances to hit him. McGregor's going to have to make, every time he connects with Mayweather, he's going to have to make it count, and that it will count more if he's wearing 8-ounce gloves than if he hit him with 10-ounce gloves. And likewise, on the other side of it, Mayweather is a more, if he's going to knock anybody out, it's going to be by hitting somebody a lot. And he has the boxing skills to hit Conor a lot. And Conor, of course, gets hit a lot. So if he's wearing smaller gloves, that gives him a chance as well. So yeah, it makes a difference.
I would agree with Chuck, because, at first when this whole thing was announced, it was like McGregor has no chance here. Mm-hmm. But then the betting odds come out, and they're kind of close, a lot closer than what people expected. And then you start thinking, still. And then all of a sudden, the video of Paul Malignaggi comes out, and you're like, whoa, he looked kind of good there. And then all of a sudden, the 8-ounce gloves. So then, these little things keep making the fight, at least the perception of the fight, a little bit more even. So it does spark a little bit of interest. However, I would like to say, combat sports right now is on the spotlight, in the world because of this fight. So safety does have to be the #1 factor, because what if something wrong happens?
Yeah.
I mean, this could really damage MMA and boxing, because, it's a huge fight, and all the main media outlets are staring at it, and, all the attention's on it. So you should be extra careful when it comes to this
that
fight.
would be tragic.
That would be horrible.
If something
Maybe we should
bad
get
happened,
Danny on the Nevada Athletic Commission, because there's nobody on that commission who seems to care.
I didn't hear
you.
anyone even offer
Yes.
that kind of.
But they did care that this thing carried out on Twitter rather than before them, so that was a bigger complaint.
I don't even know what he was upset about when he mentioned that Anthony Marnell. Like this whole fight started on Twitter.
Every time we go through one of these types of hearings, I feel like there's a side street we go down, and all of a sudden we're like, what are we doing down the side street? Why aren't we back over there?
Sure.
It's bizarre.
Okay, so then one other thing that came up, and again, I don't think, and I'll sort of echo something that drives Luke Thomas crazy, is like everything on Twitter isn't a surprise, right? No one's surprised. But really, at this point, we should not be surprised when we're dealing with 49-0 against 0-0. And I'm not trying to disparage Conor's chances in the fight. It's just the fact that we are here is, this defies all logic as far as boxing matchmaking is concerned. This would not happen if it was, Joe Schmo versus Mr. X 49-0 and there was no money to be made. We all know that by now. One thing that has come out over the last few days is after Conor's media workout, the boxing community has been openly mocking him, right? I mean, you see guys like David Haye and Terrence Crawford, copying or I guess mocking his warm-up routine and the punches and how he hits the bag and all that stuff. And to me, when I watch this, it's cringeworthy, because I'm like, you guys, like, are you really, like, this could come back to bite you in the butt more? I mean, horribly. Does it surprise you? Do you feel the same way when you see this? Like the openly mocking this late in the game, to me feels like you guys are just asking for it. He is going to have a field day with you if he's able to pull off this upset.
I have two things to say about that. Number one, McGregor wasn't sparring; he was warming up and doing this whole, windmill stuff. That's warming up. He's a guy who, one thing we all know about Conor McGregor, he talks about it all the time, about movement, about his body, and how he has the flexibility and the agility. And that's created through the way he works out. And I thought that this whole windmill thing that he was doing is just another element of that. So you're mocking a guy who's warming up his body in a really, in a very smart way. That's number one. Number two, David Haye, Terrence Crawford, you think you're really tough? Any one of you guys, step in the octagon with Conor McGregor. David Haye, you're outweighing him by 100 pounds. Step in the octagon with Conor McGregor, fight him in a real fight, and you see if you last a minute, and then maybe you can talk.
I think, the challenge was a bit silly. I mean, the movements look a bit funny, but I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has different ways to warm up. And this guy's coming from MMA. This guy's not a boxer. So, boxers don't expect really, sort of those kind of warm-ups. But I just thought the whole McGregor challenge
was that really a challenge? Like, were people really doing it? Where did that name come from?
I mean, not so long ago, Fellaini, that plays for Man U, there was a shot where a soccer ball hit him on the face, and his face was all distorted. And then people just started posting, challenges and posting similar photos. I think it's just a fun sort of social media thing. I didn't take it too seriously.
We talked a little bit last week about how the divide that starts to happen, especially in light of the whole Paulie Malignaggi thing that came out of it, was that boxing and MMA will then separate again. That's the big divide, right? This is part of what makes this fun and carnival-like and everything. I just think that the boxing side has a bit more to protect, obviously. And these guys have been they've been boxers their whole lives. They're professionals within the sport. You can almost get the sense that they're like, hey, nobody's going to come over here and just do this. They're going to cling to anything that they see to basically rally around and make it seem like a mockery to what's happening. So I can psychologically understand why some of these boxers are going that direction. It's just very weird from our perspective, because coming from MMA, we know that Conor, first of all, we know that he handles space, like you mentioned, very well. He has very unique lead-up that doesn't really tell you anything. Going into that Jose Aldo one, I remember writing a column that he jumped the shark by bringing in Ido Portal with that pool noodle. And I was like, okay, now we're getting into these esoteric, weird things that are going on. This could be the start of the fall. It didn't turn out that way. I wouldn't mock the man at all. He has given you no body of evidence to say that he can't do anything that he sets his mind out to do. So at this point, I give him that leash of respect, and I say wait and see. But from a boxing standpoint, I think that those guys are just like, hey, this is our territory, and you're coming over here with that. You know, they just want to. They're just seeing it from a boxing perspective.
He also does things. His warm-ups are different from anybody else in
What's
MMA.
wrong with that?
Nobody
What's
else in
wrong
MMA. That's fine. I mean, to me, I think it's a kind of. I see McGregor as kind of enlightened in the sense of how he treats his body and how he creates his movement. I think it's really brilliant. Nobody else in MMA does it. Forget about boxing. Yeah. If boxing guys want to complain about McGregor, they should be piling on because of the releasing of that footage and the doctored footage, like taking the 5 seconds of this and 5 seconds.
Sure.
If they want to complain about something, that's kind of breaking the so-called unwritten laws of boxing. Great, complain about that. But the whole thing about the warm-up, I mean, it is just kind of silly, as Danny says.
We got to realize, too, you realize that we are just scratching the surface in a lot of ways of how these two, like Conor McGregor and MMA, how to get better. Because everybody's coming out all the time with new ways to get better. And he's one of those rare guys who understands that he can, and he really treats it seriously. And you talk to anybody, John Danaher, Greg Jackson, you talk to any coach, and they basically talk about controlling a tempest or, understanding chaos. This is a guy on the biggest stage at MSG who's putting his hands behind his back. I mean, everything he does is slightly unconventional. Everything he does, you'd be like, this is crazy. Why is he doing this? And he's come out looking great in every scenario so far. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, what is he doing? Maybe he looks different from the things they're used to seeing, but until I see the fight and what he's able to do in there, I'll reserve my judgment.
Also, I think what has happened leading up to this fight is that the divide between MMA and boxing has magnified to the point where, even people who you would consider sort of rivals of McGregor, the Max Holloways of the world, even Gilbert Melendez telling me last week, like, they're all rooting for Conor. It has become MMA versus boxing, which I think is kind of cool and probably what they were hoping would happen. And I think it's only going to intensify come fight night. But I also think that this mocking, if you will, speaks to just the sort of archaic nature of boxing. They can't quite wrap their head around someone who does something different. And it reminds me of around 2 years ago when Conor first started to do this. No one mocks him now in MMA as far as the Ito Portal stuff, the movement stuff, because we have learned our lesson.
Right.
They have never seen anyone who kind of tries to march to the beat of his own drum, do his own thing. And I thought he did a great job yesterday on the conference call to no-sell all of them and to critique their critiquing of him. He was talking about David Haye and how stiff he was and all that. Because it's like this idea that you're going to mock someone who's just warming up, and do you really think that Conor was showing us his full hand? What I was told was that they even considered doing a strictly jiu-jitsu workout just to piss off the boxing.
That's too troll for even him. Like,
I love that idea because the boxing people would have been like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. Do you not know that you can kick and put? They're when I tweeted out some of the pictures of him hitting that heavy bag and the uppercuts and all that, and I saw people who don't follow me, so then that it kind of spread out, saying like, this guy's dead. He's not going to last 10 seconds. Do you really think that he was showing it? He understands that the whole appeal to this is that he is a mystery, that no one has seen him, actually spar, right? Why would he show you what he knows?
The boxing world has no idea how much he studies them.
Yes.
He doesn't know how much he studies everything that he's going to encounter. He studies it all. Like, he already knows everything. He knows he knows his opponent. He knows the types of questions he'll be dealing in. He knows the kind of doubts he'll be. He's already projecting all that stuff. We've seen him do it a million times.
He's talking about Ali Inoki. He was going round by round in the media scrum. Like he studied that.
Breaks into Bruce Lee, be like water. It's just
and then he starts talking about Lomachenko and Rigondeaux and Canelo. Like, to think that he is just going in there willy-nilly and doing all this stuff. Are you guys kidding yourselves?
Well, this is why the one interesting thing that I'm thinking about with this fight is, on fight night, are we going to see Conor McGregor step in there as a boxer? Because, he is a 0-0 boxer. We can't get around that.
Yeah.
Or is he going to go in there and show Floyd Mayweather stuff that Floyd has never seen? Because that's what he brings to the table. Obviously, he can't kick him, he can't elbow him, he can't take him down, he can't do all the things that he could be capable of doing in an MMA fight, and he doesn't have that threat going. But he can come at him from angles and just do things that Floyd has never seen, and that would be, if there's a chance that McGregor's going to win, and I'm among those who say the guy has no chance, and then I'm waiting to have to apologize afterward, because I've done it before where I've said he wasn't going to beat Aldo, he wasn't going to beat
you of all people.
I mean, really, I thought he had no shot at Aldo, and I even thought that short notice Mendez was gonna beat him just because of the wrestling thing. You know, wrong there, and I'll be wrong this one time too. I'm sort of preparing myself to be wrong, but looking at it from the facts, it just seems he has no shot. But the one thing that he might have is the ability to show Mayweather something that he's never seen before, and it might distract him long enough to land something.
Danny, let me ask you about the Paulie Malignaggi footage that came out, because last week on the show you guys talked about just the whole beef and him leaving, but the footage wasn't out. As short as it was. So late Friday night, Dana White puts on social media, I don't know, in total maybe like 8 seconds or something of that nature, and it has the knockdown, pushdown, and it has this other sequence from a different point in the sparring session where Conor's looking very good and hits him with a left and his head bounces back, all that stuff and more. Do you think that this crossed the line? Should they not have done this? Or once Paulie left, you know, all's fair, and this just adds to everyone's pockets and no big deal?
I mean, I think it crosses the line if McGregor would have released it, because I think there's some sort of
What's the
etiquette
difference?
and some respect there. But
How do you think Dana got the footage?
Yeah.
I mean, but Dana wasn't, you know, McGregor wasn't the one who actually posted on his Instagram account and was like, hey, look.
That's where you draw the line?
But I mean, Dana White's a promoter. He's going to promote fights, and you can't say that this didn't promote the fight. And
Oh, it
a
did,
lot of people are saying, oh, this hurt Paulie, but you know, this just set up Paulie for a fight. I mean, look at all the interest now.
Yeah.
Some betting odds came on in a possible fight between them. So yeah, I think sure it crosses some lines, some boundaries, some you know, etiquette for boxing and MMA as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're selling fights, they're promoting fights, they're trying to make money, and that was the right move for that.
Yeah, actually, Conor just called me. He just said he'd like to apologize to absolutely nobody.
I don't know.
It crosses
a
the
little
line, but isn't this the whole fight promotion thing is about crossing lines?
Yeah.
And look, if they're going to cross a line, I'd rather them cross that line than during that silly world tour that they went on, you know, with the race baiting stuff and the homophobic language. That's the line I don't want them crossing.
Okay.
They're going to cross
I'm talking about the ethics that you were just speaking about, the boxing.
The boxing, yeah, of course, it's boxing. It's against the unwritten rules of boxing. But you know, as far as I'm concerned,
in a
it's promoting.
normal circumstance, in a normal fight, a normal boxing match, you'd be like, well, this is unprecedented. Why would they do this? It's just stupid. But in a fight like this, where you got a guy who's 0-0, I just think that it's a no-brainer in some way from Dana White's perspective to be like, you know what, then he's out there chirping, saying that this was a push down on us. We have the footage. I'm going to post this up there because you know what's going to happen, right? We're all going to be talking about it. And
you know what's amazing? Like I was talking to someone yesterday about this. Could you imagine speaking to a non-sports fan and trying to explain to him or her this story with Paulie and this footage and the knockdown? Could you imagine what this person would say about us, that we have devoted so much time to whether it was a knockdown or pushdown in an exhibition that does not count, and that people are actually looking at this 8 seconds and saying like, oh man, Conor has a better chance than I thought. Like, this thing is completely absurd. We are drunk by it all, but like it is absurd. It really is absurd that we have devoted.
Fights, though, I mean, any kind of contest, especially in the fighting world, though, it plays on your delusion.
Yeah.
It plays on your suspension of belief, like all those things. And I feel like you have that in spades on this. Like, it goes on forever, and like you can let your imagination go just about any direction you want in this fight. That's how it's fun. I've tried to talk about people. I'm like, well, you can just have fun with it, even if you think it's stupid.
Right.
Have fun with it, because it's happening. You might as well embrace it and have fun with it. You know what I mean?
And even though it's just what was it, 10 seconds or so, or 15 seconds of footage that's been spliced together from different rounds and all that stuff, a 0-0 box, a guy who's 0-0 in boxing, going against a 49-0 guy coming up, or actually in this case, this is sparring against a two-time world champion. He shouldn't have 5 seconds of highlights. I mean that's.
Well, let's not forget that Paulie is retired. I saw Paulie on the World Tour.
He retired
with all due respect to Paulie, he was a little bigger than usual. He was eating a lot of pizza maybe in Brooklyn. Like this
got
is
good pizza there.
This is not prime Paulie Malignaggi. This is prime Conor McGregor.
You know what?
I don't think that you could take that much away from 10 seconds.
He had just flown in, right? Like you said, he's just there, and he's doing a 12-round sparring
He was
session.
big.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that it necessarily means, and plus there's a big gap between what Malignaggi can do and what Mayweather can do. So I'm not looking at this and saying, geez, I guess he has a better shot against Floyd. But I think it's a legitimate selling point to say, well, here's our guy. You keep saying he's 0-0. He's in there with a guy who's a two-time world champion who, yes, he's retired, but he retired like last May. So it's not like he's been, we're not talking like he's not in there with like Sugar Ray Leonard or something. He's in there with a guy who was active until, you know, pretty recently. And he had those 10 seconds of highlights in 36 minutes or whatever amount of time they sparred. It's not much, But, you know, hey.
Well, I know one thing. If Paulie felt exploited before all that came out, he certainly feels exploited now.
He didn't get paid for all of this.
I know.
Okay, but okay, could we at least agree on this after at least some of the footage comes out? I don't think they will release the full 36 minutes because if they do fight,
They could just be its own pay-per-view at this point.
yeah, why would you give it away for free? But there is no loser in all this. As bad as Paulie may have looked in that sequence, there really is no loser. Paulie's gotten more attention for this story.
Last week.
Right?
We were like, who would have known from the MMA side of things who Paulie was? Not many people even know who he was.
No.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden, we're like, oh, Conor Paulie. You know,
I legitimately think a Conor Paulie boxing match can do 1.5 million at least on pay-per-view and can sell at MSG or Barclays Center. And by the way, one thing that people aren't talking about, Paulie versus Conor in MMA, I wouldn't put that past Paulie at this point. He wants that payday. And give him credit on Monday for at least admitting that this is what he's trying to do at this point. Because 2 weeks ago he was like, no, I'm retired. Now he says he wants it. But here's the thing about Paulie being involved. Of course, he's on the Showtime broadcast, and I feel like now it's just another reason to justify the $100 price tag. I have to be honest, I kind of want to sit in the back and listen to what he's going to say on the broadcast because I want to see A, if he's going to be biased, B, what kind of technical, little nuggets he's going to spew about Conor because he's one of like probably 5 or 6 people on planet Earth that knows just how Conor boxes at this point. So this is a huge coup for Showtime. Huge for Conor, huge for Dana, huge for Mayweather, who hasn't had to do no promotion whatsoever over the past 2 weeks, right? It's been all Paulie doing it for him. There's no loser in this.
I do think that I do hope that Showtime's not pissed him because when you had him on the hour this week and you asked him, whether after being in with Conor he thinks that McGregor has a better chance. He basically gave us a non-answer answer.
It was a good one.
He said, I don't want to give an answer because I work for Showtime and they rely on pay-per-view buys, which is about as much as close to saying this. He has no shot as you could possibly get. I mean, really, he's basically saying, I don't want to ruin the pay-per-view.
There might have been a bit of ego in that response, right? Because if he says he does have a chance, then what does it say about him?
If he says he has a chance, he doesn't want
footage.
Yeah, he doesn't want to say it because he also, he probably doesn't
want to justify what we just saw. But again, it was.
But please, no, not MMA. Don't bring. If you also
you don't want to see Paulie versus Conor at UFC 225?
No, not at all. I mean, look, a boxing match between them is one thing.
Yes.
But if you add in, say, okay, Conor, we'll also let you do the kicks and we'll let you do it. Forget about it. I mean, Malignaggi is going to get a head kick.
Such a step of illogic that I couldn't even follow that. Like if
Wait a second. You know what's happening in 9 days, right?
Yes, but coming from that, then we take this little pod out of this and into like a world where Paulie is going to be in MMA and fight him ahead of all the contenders and everything. You'd be like, what is going on?
Better chance of happening. Max Holloway, Conor in MMA in the UFC, or Conor versus Paulie in boxing? Man,
that's a rough one. I would say the Paulie fight. To be honest. I think there's
how crazy is that?
I think there's a lot of interest there.
Sad.
Just the footage itself, and McGregor did say when you asked him on the media conference call was yesterday, I believe. He's like, get on the line.
Join the queue.
Let me get this fight over with, and we'll see. He didn't say no, I'm not gonna fight him. I already beat him up. He didn't say any of that. He left totally the possibility open. And McGregor did say he wants to fight in both and have that sort of continuum. We see the Sufa boxing thing. I mean, it's not far fetched if those two guys fight by next year.
I also think the fight you set up for MMA was in a division I don't think that is ever going to see Conor McGregor.
145?
Yeah, I think he's long gone from there. I mean,
he said yesterday that he's still the champ. You don't believe him?
Well, he never lost the title, so in his mind he certainly has every right to be the champ.
Dare
but
you
I don't
say that to his face.
What? That he never lost the title?
No, that he's not the champ at 145 anymore.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he's not going to ever fight there again.
Okay.
And also, we got to keep in mind, like, the Max Holloway fight, that's a great fight on paper, and I'm sure MMA fans would love it, but what would make more money? Paulie or Max Holloway? We already saw that fight.
Yeah, look at the reaction.
So
it just depends, as I was mentioning to Jeff on the way in, like, if he has a good showing against Mayweather, regardless if he loses, but he has a good showing, you could actually feasibly look at that fight and say, add something to it. Because you'd be like, okay, wait, now he's fighting a guy who, they have this beef, and this is probably closer to where he should be in interpoint rather than Mayweather. You could make that. But if he looks horrible, I just can't imagine there would be any kind of outcry to see that fight. Like, where people would be like,
sure,
I want to see him in the boxing ring again. It would be like his only natural return would be to the UFC.
Yes, if he has some kind of moral victory and goes the full 12, then that dream can continue. Last thing on this fight, before we move along, this is the last time we'll be doing this show in studio. We'll be doing one out in Las Vegas, but the last time before the fight here. Has the build-up exceeded our expectations? Has it not quite lived up to the hype? Do you feel like the fight is fizzling en route to August 26th, or do you feel like it continues to build?
It's hard to say because I feel like we are in the sort of the epicenter of where it is. I think that the MMA world is where this fight is building. I don't think that boxing people are all that interested in it. You know, I think
they can't wait for the storm to
They
leave.
just want it to be gone, so they could see Triple G fight. They want to see that fight there. You know, I don't think that the boxing that general public. I mean, it's hard to say because certainly some of the mainstream websites and news outlets, every time something happens in this fight, whether it be the 8 ounces, the 10 ounces to 8 ounces, or some other little twist, it gets put out there. So yeah, there's certainly the buildup is. I'm not going to say it's exceeded my expectations. I'm just going to say that I'm really glad that it's a short window. That this thing. I mean, it's 9 days out. If it was 2 or 3 weeks out, it would be too much.
Okay, wow.
I think the buildup has been, sort of what I expected as far as the magnitude goes, but I think it's been a surprising buildup. Like, we've had a lot of surprises. It hasn't been just them two making headlines, throwing accusations at each other, talking smack. We had the gloves situation, the poly situation. The whole tour had its own little
ups and downs,
stories as well.
Racism accusations.
And
a lot of layers.
And I think that's not over yet. I think, in the next week or so, we should see more layers added to that story.
To be honest, man, it's like difficult to know what my expectations were for it because it's just one of those things. I think you think about the partition coming down and finding this is huge. The craziest guy from MMA, the biggest name versus boxing's decades long, whatever guy coming in who's been the big intrigue in the boxing ring. In one way, you think that's as big as it could possibly get. But I think that people haven't lost sight of the novelty of it. People haven't lost sight of the circus atmosphere. People, like you're mentioning a lot of the sideline things. I think there's a lot of people who just see it spectacle alone. And you can understand that. There's just that whole global tour that they went on, the 4-city tour. It devolved, in the last couple dates to that sort of setup. And I think that there hasn't been, I guess, a real moment where I've really, really felt like there's a visceral connection to want to see them fight. Like where you're just like, oh my God, now I can't wait to see these guys fight. That happens sometimes where even with Conor a lot, like with Jose Aldo, for instance, there's just a point where you're like, there's only one way to solve this now. You have to see them fight. That's the only resolution that's going to come out of this. I haven't got there. But you're not sure if it can get there. It's just you're dealing with so many weird artificial elements blending in with what's literal, and I'm not sure you can get to that point. But I would say it's about as big as I thought it would get. But I thought the boxing guys would be more behind it, the boxing media, and I thought the general public, you would be hearing about it a lot more by this point.
As a sporting event, it's not. I think it's not generating as much buzz as a sporting event as it could have. I think it's getting the buzz as a
Let's see
spectacle.
Next week. I think we can't really fully write
that. I told you guys before the show that I was in touch with my editors over at the Washington Post. They're not sending me out there. They're sending a features writer because they're looking at this as spectacle. They're not looking at it, and you said, well, what if McGregor wins? It's the biggest upset and all that. Well, I guess they'll deal with it if that happens. But they're kind of playing the odds and saying, well, this is probably not going to happen. So let's get a feature writer out there to write about the whole scene, the spectacle, and all that, rather than getting somebody who covers the sport to cover it as an actual sporting event. So I think that's kind of a little more prevalent than you'd expect.
I'll say this about the buildup. I feel like they have done a good job of keeping it in the news. It hasn't just been Floyd and Conor, as you mentioned, just going back and forth. It feels like every time it kind of got quiet, something would happen. Even like the Draymond Green jersey thing, like that kind of exploded for a couple of days. What happened on the tour and the Espinoza stuff and calling him a weasel. And, it always kind of felt like there was something else that pushed this along. This week it's the gloves, and last week the workouts and the mocking of, his routine and all that. And so I expect come August 26th, I was wondering if it would fizzle, if this was, so much sizzle and no steak, and it doesn't feel like that, at least as of right now. I agree with you. If it was happening in September, October, I think we would get tired of it, but I'm not quite tired. Now, the tour, when it went low, worth noting that Floyd unprompted apologized for his comments last week. Conor did as well, and kind of gave a little more explanation as to what he believed he said, and tried to clarify his comments. It was interesting, and actually didn't get played up as much as I thought it may when he said that Floyd is a rat and he is someone who beats his wife in front of his children. I mean, that went to a whole other level in terms of making this very personal. But we'll see what happens next week. They're not going to be in front of each other a lot. They're going to have one more press conference, but I don't feel like it has sort of flatlined. And that was possible because there was a chance people would get tired of them.
But you have the best MMA promoter, self-promoter in McGregor, the best MMA promoter in Dana White, and the best boxing promoter in Floyd and his team. I mean, when you put those together, you're gonna get some, something's gonna get stirred up.
I'm happy you mentioned Dana, by the way, because one thing that I've enjoyed about this process is that Dana doesn't have to hide his bias. He could be boxing promoter in this case.
He's so good at hiding his bias.
Well, no, but I mean, look, we have been critical of him over the past year or two, thinking that he lacks enthusiasm as a promoter, that he's just kind of checked out at times, that he makes strange decisions like, disparaging his champions who he then has to go out and promote. In this case, he is all in on Conor. He can be all in on Conor. He can be the Bob Arum. He could be the Don King. He could be the De La Hoya.
He would hate you so much for saying he could be the Bob Arum.
But you know what I mean? Like yesterday on the conference call, I don't know if you heard, but I was like, this is the best Dana that I've heard in a very long time, because he can just promote one guy and it's him versus boxing, and he loves this and this is personal to him. As far as us, critiquing his promoting skills, which we have done on the show, this is the best Dana that we've seen in a long time. It's like a rejuvenated Dana. And I don't know if he goes back to his old self come 215, probably, but it feels like there's a little more pep in his step here. And he works better at this stage as the boxing guy who can pick and tell you who he wants to win, as opposed to the guy who's trying to remain neutral, because I think sometimes he lets his feelings, like with John Jones, get in the way. And he doesn't actually do
It will be interesting to see
work as a promoter.
A lot of what comes out of this fight. Because honestly, Dana White having cashed in with the amount of money he did, we always, at least I've been talking about a lot, how can you stay enthusiastic when you've already realized a big end game like that? You've already realized it. What is left for you? Well, this is something that was left for him. So it rejuvenates him, and I think you can see that he's kind of pulling back to his old roots a little bit. He's kind of going back to that, which is kind of fun. Like if you follow the sport long enough, it's kind of fun to see. But it remains to be seen what happens after this, because there is no escalation. Where is the next escalation? I don't know what that would be, even for Conor McGregor, because every single fight has been leading somewhere, and here we are at the biggest thing he could possibly have. At least that's what it seems like. I don't know what would be bigger just yet. If he wins, who knows? Maybe it gets bigger in other ways. We don't know. But right now, you're like, what happens to these guys? There is no bigger escalation than what we're about to do.
Okay, let's talk about a few other things. Earlier this week, they officially announced that Tony Ferguson would be fighting Kevin Lee on October 7th, UFC 216, in Las Vegas for the interim lightweight championship. I'm curious what you guys think about this. UFC 216 has suffered greatly. It looked like they were going to have, at least 2 titles defended on that card. For various reasons, from what I'm told, they tried every single available champion. No one was available, whether it was injuries, contract disputes, etc. 217, the MSG card, looks strong, at least as of right now, with GSP Bisping, middleweight title, and just announced last night, Cody Garr versus TJ Dillashaw. Right now, this is the main event. There may be another one, but this is the title fight on the card, and you know that they want title fights on their pay-per-views. What do you think of this matchup?
Well, I think, we did see before number 13 fight the champion, so, it doesn't surprise me exactly that they made this matchup, but my biggest takeaway was, Dana White was like, Conor's going to come back in December, he's going to come back to MMA. Conor himself was saying the same thing, but why is there a lightweight interim title being contested if he's going to come back later this year, So that to me just signal that, the future for Conor McGregor is still uncertain, that who knows when he'll be back to MMA. So that was sort of my biggest takeaway. But as far as the fight itself, it is a great fight on paper. I actually think Tony Ferguson versus Kevin Lee is very exciting. And if you look at that division, Alvarez is in tough with Gaethje. Khabib, we know if he's had some issues with his weight, and
But you mentioned Khabib, you bypassed him, but shouldn't there be a more in-depth explanation as to why this fight isn't happening? We see on his Instagram, he is training.
Right.
Why isn't this fight happening?
That was sort of my takeaway on this whole thing. I mean, I agree with Danny. There's no need to have an interim title fight if Conor McGregor is coming back, by the end of the year. But if you're going to have one, Khabib Nurmagomedov has to be in it. I mean, there's no way you could give away even a fake interim belt. You have to have the best guy in the division, other than the champion. At least he's not proven to beat McGregor yet, but he's the best #1 guy. Has to be in that fight. That's not to disparage Kevin Lee. He's a really excellent fighter, and he should be right up there, maybe to be the next guy in line. But he's not one of the top two. He's not one of those. It's got to be those two.
7.
It's got to be one of those two guys. They have to be the ones to be fighting. If you're going to create a belt, anytime a belt's on the line, you got to look at it differently. You can't just say, well, we need a fight for 216.
That is what was said.
Of course,
that
because
Khabib
was ready to fight on the next month, but they needed to fight a month ahead of time. So, okay, make the fight, but don't make it an interim title.
It's better than home de random. It's like you get into that situation where they had to create something, a belt, because in their mind, to do the pay-per-view, there has to be that symbol attached to it that's being contested over. So it's better than that, because you do have guys on these winning streaks going against each other. But the problem is, I don't know how you guys feel, but Tony Ferguson particularly, like his Khabib Nurmagomedov fight was the one that was going to get him over. It was how he treated that fight. So he wasn't there yet. He was just a guy who's surging forward. You needed to see him in that crossroads. We didn't get that. So now you're putting him in prematurely into a situation like this, maybe against a guy who's too young. He's only 24 years old. He hasn't really beaten the cream of the crop yet, and he's being thrust in this position out of necessity. And these things, every time we do this, and they kind of breaks off from logic, are always tougher to swallow, you know what I mean? It's a great fight, but adding that interim title that doesn't make sense other than to fill a spot, like they create it just to fill a spot, that never jibes that well with me.
And if this remains the main event, I mean, is this a suitable main event? Like, is this passable?
I mean, it's certainly an exciting fight. If you're looking at it from the perspective of would I like to sit down and watch these two guys fight? Well, yeah, I would, because they're both tremendous fighters. They're really exciting fighters.
$59.99.
But yeah, exactly.
I would also say it depends on the rest of the card, what else they add on. I mean, but
it's rapidly
I feel like the
approaching.
logical move was Khabib versus Tony Ferguson, but I feel like there's some sort of fatigue there, fan fatigue, because they've been booked to fight so many times.
So is it acceptable then? Should they move on? Is it actually a mistake to book that fight because we've been tricked a few times with these guys?
It's a tricky spot.
Maybe that's the play. Maybe that's why they did it. No?
In my mind, they could make that fight as often as they could until it happens. I mean, this was, to me, that was one of the premier fights they could make. It was like the old UFC where you really had two momentums just going right at each other, different styles.
So many times.
I know they've tried it so many times, and I know people are like, at this point, why do this again? But I mean, until you see it, man, it's just like an itch you're not scratching. You know what I mean? You want to be able to see that fight. I would have liked to have seen him do it. I would have rather have seen that. But I just think that Kevin Lee, I mean, he's a great fighter. He had that nice come from behind win in Brazil. He had a nice showing, even though a little controversial in his last fight. But he's so young that you've got this guy who's kind of coming up in the wings that could be there for you for the next go-round. I feel like they're just accelerating these guys' paths a little bit.
Plus, this also jumps back to where we're talking about Dana White as a promoter. Someone asked him about why is Khabib not in it, and he's like, well, he's not ready. And so I'm thinking, wow, did I miss it that he re-injured himself? So I'm going online looking at, and then I read that, well, they wanted to fight in November. I mean, we're talking like less than a month.
Okay, how about this? The UFC is going to Detroit on December 2nd.
That's the bigger
What is Kevin Lee's nickname? The Motown Phenom. I mean, to have a card in Detroit without Kevin Lee, that would have
made more sense.
Yes.
If they're having it in Detroit, you'd have been like, okay, well, I guess we're going to accelerate, put him in there, make him a
It's
star.
not so much the interim title. Look, those belts are just, they're a dime a dozen now, and I honestly, sure, get Ferguson more money. He got screwed out of 209. Get Kevin Lee more money. That's all it represents. Right. Whatever. Conor's the champ. It would be nice if he defends the belt sooner rather than later. We all agree on that. And so you're trying to fill a hole on a pay-per-view. This again goes back to the problem of having dates and just trying to plug them in as opposed to taking the fight to the best. Kevin Lee fighting in a big fight in Detroit and he wins will turn him into a star.
He's fighting in Detroit where he could win in front of his screen. For a sweepstakes to fight Conor McGregor, you're pushing him over the biggest level possible.
It's totally back-assward to take the date and make that the most important thing instead of the fights. Make the fights the most important thing. That's what the people want to see. They don't want you to, oh wow, I got to have a fight on that day. That's really important to me. People don't care whether the fight is this week, next week, or on a Tuesday.
They reserve the date.
If it's a Tuesday night, and it's a good enough fight, people will watch it. That's so make the best fights.
I'm not saying I agree with this, but a possible explanation for the Kevin Lee Ferguson matchup is, I feel like in this new era of the UFC, a lot of the matchmaking is being catered towards the casual fans. And sure, Khabib would have promoted the fight as well as Tony Ferguson, but I feel like if you compare Kevin Lee is really going to go out there to really promote this fight and try to make this big event. We know he's really good on the mic, and he's not afraid of making any bold statements, and we know Tony Ferguson can fire back as well.
Sure.
So I think promotion-wise, if you're going to build an event around, this matchup between Lee and Ferguson is much better than the Khabib.
Yeah, and fair or not, maybe it's not fair for me to harp on this because this was the beginning of Conor McGregor's career as he rose up through the ranks. What was the biggest claim about him was, well, the UFC is just like setting him up for success. And, having these two guys fight, both of them are tremendous fighters, but if the end game is those two guys, the winner of that fight going on to face McGregor, it's a much more exciting fight than if you have Khabib fighting against McGregor. It's a much more dangerous kind of opponent for McGregor to have to face. I know he solved short notice Chad Mendes, but Khabib is a different kind of grappler, and it would be you don't want to have your great Conor McGregor on his back with some guy beating him up, and that's just a possibility when you're fighting Khabib. Whereas if no matter how a Kevin Lee McGregor fight or a Tony Ferguson McGregor fight goes, it's going to be exciting.
Through this whole interlude, how crazy would it be that this whole boxing interlude from where he left MMA to that Kevin Lee would emerge as the guy who would end up in that spot to face him.
Right.
I still think that Nate Diaz is the front runner for his return, and so let's not forget about him. I think that fight probably sells the most right now.
More than Paulie?
Well, honestly, I think if he looks good, it could do close to $2 million if Conor looks good in the boxing match. But to bring up what you said, you wonder if they didn't have that exchange on FS1 after the Chiesa fight, does this fight even get made? And I'm hoping that they're going to use that. You would think, because remember they went back and forth. It was very entertaining. You would think that they used that.
It's great.
I have nothing against the fight. I have nothing against Kevin Lee fighting Tony Ferguson. I don't even care that it's for an interim title. It just boggles my mind that they are going to Detroit 2 months later. They're going to Detroit 2 months later, put the freaking fight there, and if it doesn't work out, or October 7th, you got to pull the plug. They tried every single champion. Name a champion, they tried him. Who's available? For some reason, they're not available. So that's just short-term booking. Yeah. Think about the star that Kevin Lee could turn into if he wallops Tony Ferguson in Detroit and then gets on the mic and says, Conor, where you at?
I know.
You know what I mean? It's just like, this is perfect. It's all coming together. It just, that stuff, that is promotion 101. Dare I say it's promotional malpractice.
Ooh.
How about that one?
Yeah, you owe somebody some money, I think.
Okay, let me ask you guys about Michael Bisping versus GSP. We have talked about it ad nauseum, but new little wrinkle, GSP saying on Monday that it is in writing that he must defend the title if he wins against Robert Whittaker. Does this make you like the fight a little more? Does this make the fight a little... Because before, remember at the press conference, he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And we all kind of thought he was going to go down to 170. Now he has to defend the title and unify the belts if he wins.
We talked a little bit last week, and basically my point was that, the problem is we don't know what the stakes are. He wins, what happens then? What happens then? So I feel like this is a big piece of the puzzle because GSP, this then tells you he has to then be there for a little bit more of a residency than just going in and, one fight and he's gone, he's going back down. I feel like if he wins that title, he has to, because you've been holding that entire, to get to this point, you've been holding that division hostage, and I think you got to open it back up regardless who has the belt. But if it's GSP, that makes me feel better because it makes me realize that he's thinking of, that they're thinking of the big picture, not just this one fight. That was part of the problem with this fight setup to begin with.
I suppose, go ahead.
I think this signals, at least to me, and I could be wrong, but it signals sort of where GSP is at. You asked him about, what is he going to do if he, goes on and beats Michael Bisping, and he told you, he's I'm taking one fight at a time, and although he has in contract that he would have to defend the belt, you can't make a man fight. He has the option to retire.
But he can't fight at 170.
Exactly, but he wouldn't be able to have any other fights. And I think at this point, if GSP were to, take that title, that's one of the highest highs. I don't think he, defending it would really do much to him. I think it would, but, not to the point that, it'll take his stardom to another level. So I think, it's very likely with this that he'll likely retire after that bout.
Depends,
after the Bisping fight. You think he retires after the Bisping fight?
Possibly.
No, I don't think he comes back. I don't think he goes through all of this, 4 years retires away and the contracts and then says, see you later. I would be very surprised.
I don't know that he retires, but I also can see him having more control of his destiny than he let on. Yes, he has. If he contractually has to defend that belt, then he defends the belt, assuming he gets it. But against whom? I mean, is he going to fight the next guy in line at 185? Well, geez, if he does, he'd be the first guy that does that for quite a while.
I mean, yeah, he would fight Whitaker.
Would he? I mean,
Well, he has to. It says Whitaker.
It says Whitaker.
Yes.
Doesn't just say he has to defend the belt?
No, he has to fight Whitaker. He has to unify the titles.
Is that
yes,
the way
that's
it
what
was?
he said.
He said it was a
Listen
Whitaker
to the
fight.
MMA Hour.
Oh man.
Yes, that's what he said. So that's my question. Does it make you feel better about the fight?
But here's
you can't
another.
just go out and pick someone else as a guy who's the interim champion.
He was getting beat up pretty well in those last couple showings, and it's been 4 years. Let's just say, because Bisping too, it seems like all of his fights are these wars, except for maybe the last Rocco one. But he's got beat up too. Let's just say they have that type of fight where both guys come out of it just beat up. There's a party that says, I don't know if I want to see him fight a guy like Whitaker who's coming up and just coming into his own. A young guy like that with all that power and just what he brings there, you're like, I don't know. Yeah, I think I get just a little bit queasy thinking about that matchup if that's the case. I think he has to actually look good for that to feel good too, you know what I mean?
If he wins by the skin of his teeth and gets beat up in the process, then yes, okay, there is a chance that he says, all right, enough is enough. But I think if he wins and looks dominant, and I don't know what the odds are at right now. I don't know if you guys know. Do you guys know what the odds? I don't even know if the odds are at. I think they probably are since this fight has been discussed ad nauseam.
Hit up your boy John Anik. He knows those odds.
That's right. I think that he will. It sounds like he wants to stick to the agreement and defend the title, and that would be the best thing for the middleweight division. You wonder, we'll probably never know the answer to this question, but if Romero would have won that fight in July, does he agree to this stipulation? Because Romero's just so darn big.
True.
Closer to him in age.
It's almost hard to imagine that fight. Because of that.
Just because, so let's not forget, Whitaker used to fight at 170. So now we have two guys who are former 170 pounders.
I would say if you have to defend the belt against anyone, probably, the best matchup for him out of the top guys would be Whitaker. He's not a huge guy.
Right.
And sort of
The
his
wrestler that Romero is. Okay, just a couple other things I wanted to ask you guys about before we say goodbye. Daniel Cormier broke his silence, and I thought maybe one of the most interesting things that he said was kind of changing his tune after the fight, saying, there is no rivalry, it's done. Now he's saying, I'm going to get back in there and I'm going to meet this man again. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know when, but I'm going to fight John Jones again. Is this a crazy idea, or do you actually foresee? Because let's not forget, we have seen guys who are 0-2 against an opponent fight them for the third time. Vanderlei Silva against Quinton Rampage Jackson comes to mind most famously. Is this possible? Do you think that this could happen?
He's going to have a hard time making that happen. What were the pay-per-view numbers? So they came in 800,000?
Did very well, a little more.
It's very well. It's pretty well. I would say that that's really his biggest calling card. It's just like, people are invested in that rivalry. But they have been booked 5 times. You're talking about fighter fatigue or matchup fatigue. It's going to take some circumstance to really pull something like that together, where we come to think of that fight as a necessity again. Because right now, just the way he was finished and everything that happened in that fight, it just didn't seem like they would ever face each other again. That was kind of the hard part of it, right? I can see why Daniel Cormier would want to fight him again. I'm just not sure you're going to get John Jones, especially if he, I know that Cormier could fight him at heavyweight too, but if he goes on to the heavyweight division, who knows? I just don't see the path. But you never know. I would say that I'd put it like less than 10% of that fight happening again.
You had actually asked them in your interview, because I sometimes do listen to the interview hour. Not always,
Jeff.
but I must have missed that one. But I
see your tweets
I did catch this one. And you asked him if he was thinking about moving back to heavyweight, and he made it sound like he wouldn't do that. So that tells me that I think there's a better chance of Daniel Cormier being the light heavyweight champion again than there is of him fighting John Jones. Because I think that John Jones, maybe he's got one more light heavyweight fight in him, and then he's going up to heavyweight, and then they need a champion. And who in that division beats Daniel Cormier other than John Jones? Maybe nobody.
Right.
So I could see that happening, but it just is hard for me to imagine him. And frankly, I thought that, this was the chance for Daniel Cormier to beat John Jones. John Jones had been out for what? Almost a year, close to 2 years. And Daniel Cormier was at the height of his powers. He's getting older, but he was at the height of his powers. Jones was kind of rusty. This was the chance. And now Jones is going to be back into his rhythm. Daniel's going to get a little bit older. A year from now, I just don't see it.
I would give it a little bit more of a chance than these two guys. Just the fact that, the light heavyweight division, I mean, Volkan Ozdemir joined the UFC 8 months ago, and now he's a UFC title contender. It's very shallow. He picks up, 2 wins, and he's, right back in there for a title shot. The only thing I would say is that there wouldn't be much interest because, he is 0-2, but this is not Joseph Benavidez versus Demetrius Johnson, where they were very friendly and it was just a competitive, fight. These guys actually have bad blood. And, I know John Jones kind of sort of sealed that up with his speech when he beat Cormier, but I think it's a possibility. But in order to generate interest, I really do feel like Cormier is going to have to reinvent himself in some sort of way and look different so that fans can wonder, oh, wow, he picked up new skills.
Sure.
Oh, he's looking different. Maybe he can beat John Jones now.
Let's not forget he was doing very well in the fight.
He was doing very well, but I mean, he's still looking like, if you go through his previous performances, he's looked well, but he still looked like Daniel Cormier, his regular fighting style. Now, if he comes back and shows something different, then maybe fans can.
You think that Jones would stick around at light heavy? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe. I mean, the line is very short. We're not talking about a long
path
time.
would be if John Jones begins to fall. That's really his easiest path because you need John Jones at this point. He's already beat him twice and he's at the top. Well, of course, anybody wants to face the guy at the top, especially a rival like that. But he's going to need to fall somewhere along the way. I just can't see it. I don't even see a situation, even if he comes back, because what would, in a year's time, he'll be what is he now, 38, 39 years old?
Yeah.
He's a year older, and he'd have to go through 2 guys, let's say, to even be in the conversation. We don't know where that puts him, but I feel like bad blood follows as long as it's eye to eye. They got to be at the same level. And I feel like at some point, John Jones, he can't catch John Jones now. It's going to be John Jones having to fall at some point.
And the bad blood also, I mean, afterward, John Jones was so gracious and went over to him.
Yeah, but DC didn't accept it. He said,
DC has not even seen that, didn't he? Sure. He told you that he hadn't even watched that stuff. I think the public has seen it. And I think the public is not going to be as oh man, these guys hate each other as they were before that fight because they saw John Jones, kind of go over and embrace him and kind of act like in a compassionate way. And in a way, I think that kind of would hurt whatever appeal there might be for this fight. If Jones had kind of gone over to him and gave him treated him like Ronda Rousey treated Miesha Tate, maybe, but not this way.
Is it inconceivable to think, though, that, okay, look at the light heavyweight division. There is a money fight there between Jones and Gustafsson, in my opinion, because of how the first fight went. In my opinion, best fight in UFC history. And there really isn't anyone right now for Stipe Miocic. Now, Miocic has contract issues, and he's not coming back until they fix him. But what if DC goes up to fight Miocic next and wins?
Well, that changes things.
Right? I don't think that's a crazy idea.
Nothing is crazy in that sport.
And then he goes up.
That would be different.
That brings a whole new
But again, it all comes down to what DC said to you, that he's not going there. If he did it,
maybe he's playing possum.
Well,
I'm still not ruling it out because of as you mentioned, it's sold, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, Benavidez, DJ doesn't sell, so there's no real desire. But I think that they would have gone back to the Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey if they were still around and Ronda was up 2-0. So if it sells, they will do it. And this one clearly sold in a down year pay-per-view wise. I don't think I didn't expect them to say that, to be honest, but I don't think it's a crazy idea. Last thing, a man who knows DC, man who knows John Jones, Frank Mir, now former UFC champion, UFC fighter, former UFC champion as well, but he was a part of the UFC for 16 years, longest tenure as far as active fighters were concerned, and now he's in Bellator. Do we like this signing? Now, important to note that he can't fight until April of 2018 because he's still under USADA suspension, but what do we think about this signing by Bellator?
It seems obvious in some way. I mean, I don't know. We always talk about Bellator signing these kind of relics that come over at the tail end of the career. Maybe they have some red tape on them and stuff like that. Frank Mir is really not that different. And honestly, the strangest part is just that he has been part of the UFC. He is like the institution itself. Him and Dana have been boys for so long and everything else. So it's a little weird to contemplate him fighting for Bellator. But at the same time, man, I mean, it's what Bellator is basically, I know Luke was talking about this last week. What they've been doing is you add these elements to, if you're trying to do pay-per-views, you keep putting these little pieces in where people recognize his names, and Frank Mir fits right into that.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a good signing. I mean, Frank Mir wanted to fight. The UFC wasn't going to give him any more fights. Plus, he was suspended. He still is, and he wants to keep on fighting. Bellator's still a big stage, and although Frank Mir's towards the end of his career, I wouldn't say he's a guy that people are claiming for him to retire.
Is there an appetite still for him, to fight the Fedors of the world, the Mitrions, who's available?
Maybe somewhere in that realm. Yeah. I mean, look, Frank Mir's lost
That's basically who he has over there, right?
He's
So those
lost
guys.
6 of his last 8 fights, but the 2 wins were both first-round knockouts over guys that are as good as anybody he's going to fight over in Bellator. I mean, I think that he's not going to be in over his head in that heavyweight division, such as it is, that little tiny waiting pool that happens to be the Bellator heavyweight division. So, you know, if he's going to resume his career better than he does it there than in the among the killers in the UFC.
I guess I was a little surprised. I think he just turned 38, if memory serves me correct.
I think so.
He's only free to fight in April. It's August. That's in 8 months. Why the rush to sign him? A lot can happen in the next. And I guess it's no skin off their back to just sign him and get him in their system and whatever. But that's kind of a long ways away, right? I mean, I was just surprised at the timing. I didn't expect them to sign him so soon. I do think he's a nice little addition. He's a familiar face. That's clearly what they're going for. And I think he has a little more fight left in him, despite the layoff. I was just surprised that it happened now. That's it. I mean, that was my big takeaway.
Yeah, also, you know, bring him in the broadcast. I mean, the guy did a really good job when he was doing WEC stuff. He's great. I mean, he's an eloquent guy. I think that he brings something to the table, a little bit more than just what he can provide inside the cage.
Sure, I think he's great. I think it was a shame that they didn't use him more with Fox. They took him away because of the suspension, but WEC, he was phenomenal.
Yeah, I thought he was good.
Yeah. He does ACB stuff, and I'm still unclear if he's still allowed to do that once he starts fighting. I actually asked Bellator that, and they didn't get back to me, but I think at least as of now, he's going to be their color commentator. So some good news for Frank Mir. All right, we're out of time, guys.
It's the last one we do here before the big show.
I'm getting a little sad. I don't know why. I don't know what the emotions are. It feels like we're going off to do something special, but it's just another day or another week.
You're just returning to Vegas for like the
yes, exactly,
time.
for the thousandth time this summer, it seems like. So that is the news. The news is that we will be doing a show on the road next Thursday, same time and place as far as where you watch it. 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time, so that'll be on the road.
Hey, one quick thing. Yes. I just wanted to say happy birthday to my daughter, Lily.
Oh,
her birthday today.
How about that?
Yes.
Happy birthday, Lily. How old?
12.
12?
Yep.
You got it in there right at the end, at the buzzer.
Yes.
What would have happened if you forgot?
I couldn't go home.
Yeah, that'd be it for him.
What are we doing? Anything fun? Watching old fights?
Yeah, just watching some fights.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure
we'll
she'd
figure
love
it
to
out.
do
Probably
that.
an amusement park or something.
All right.
We'll see.
That's great news. Happy birthday, Lily. For now, we shall say goodbye. Appreciate you watching once again. Again, we're back next week, MMA Hour on Monday, off to Vegas. Whole bunch of stuff coming your way next week from Las Vegas, but we'll save that information for next week. For Jeff, Danny, Chuck, I am Ariel. Again, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next week.